Okay, well, I'll start now. Hello, everybody. My name is Greg Duke. I am the database and data partner for Sapel Analytics. And today we also have Ruthie Giles, who's another database worker, but she also does a lot of prospect management work. So if you have any questions about prospect management or need anything, just give her a shout. Although I work in databases mainly, somehow I've become known as an Excel guru. And so I'm going to start off. So I guess I am screen sharing now. Good. The purpose of this lecture essentially was to kind of talk about some of the new things I've been working with in Excel. And some of this is very new. In other words, it wasn't available in earlier versions of Excel. And so as a result, I have been trying to keep up with what's going on in Excel. And I want to start off this lecture by kind of saying, a lot of us think, oh, we learned something in Excel. We want to tell everybody it's all great. And then we find that nobody in our family cares, but obviously a lot of you care because there are 40 of you here. So I guess this slide is a little redundant. And I also wanted to say, if you went to my New Orleans lecture for AASP, some of this will seem familiar. I've kind of removed and added things, but you may remember this picture. This is actually a picture that was created in Microsoft Excel. There's a Japanese artist named Tetsuo Hiroshi. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He has created many landscapes and portraits using vector graphics in Microsoft Excel. All of these are created by using the shapes and colors that are already in Excel. It's quite amazing what he's been able to do. The other thing that I showed off kind of in New Orleans was this drum machine that I found lurking around in Excel. Oh yes, Ruthie has just put up the link to Tetsuo Hiroshi. You can actually also see some videos on YouTube of him making some of these, which is pretty amazing. A while back when I was looking around for interesting things on Excel, I found this drum machine. It actually works. I've used it myself, and one of the descriptions said that it produces vicious techno beats, which I thought was quite an amusing description. I'm not a big fan of that kind of music. My stepson is. But I sent it to him and he didn't exactly write back. So I guess he's part of the friends and family is not a big fan of Excel. So today I wanted to talk about a few things. The first is scoring prospects using what's officially known as Power Excel, and then kind of what I call Power Excel tools. In other words, Excel tools that are powerful. I also want to talk a little bit about conditional formatting, because as it happens, a few weeks ago, Marianne and I were working on a project and we were using some conditional formatting tools. And I thought, yeah, some of these things are pretty neat. And conditional formatting is not as intuitive as it should be. And so hopefully I can explain a little bit about how to use conditional formatting. And lastly, if we have any time left over, I'd like to kind of open the floor to any wildcard topics that might be useful for anyone. If anyone wants to know anything about Excel, I mean, that's pretty broad brush, but if there's anything that could be helpful if someone's working on, if it could be even a future water cooler topic, I'd be happy with that too. So I've always talked about the difference between Power Excel and powerful Excel. And Power Excel is a specific and fairly new part of the Excel library. And I always kind of refer back to one of my favorite quotes from Breaking Bad, when Jesse very early on advised Walter White, with this mess business, that you don't need a criminal lawyer, i.e. someone who works in criminal law. You need a criminal lawyer. In other words, a lawyer who is a criminal. And I think that's kind of the difference between Power Excel, kind of the formal title, and Power Excel informal title. So I'm going to start by talking about something that if you've ever had, if you ever worked with Marianne, or often we've talked about this on our water cooler chats, the concept of RFM scores. So RFM is an acronym for recency, frequency, and monetary when it comes to donations. It's a way of scoring gifts in your database, how likely someone is to give in the future based on what they've done in the past. And we're looking at 3 different scores here. How recently is someone given? How frequently does someone give? And how much does someone give? Each of these measures is getting a score from 1 to 5. So approximately, when you're looking at this, approximately the lowest 20% are going to get a 1. The next 20% are going to get a 2, and on up to 5. And we don't add these scores together because each of these scores has its own significance. So we actually rate someone by their recency, frequency, recency-frequency-monetary, with 1-1-1 being the lowest and 5-5-5 being the highest. Although, as Marianne has pointed out, we don't necessarily say that, say, a 2-4-1 is better or worse than a 1-4-2. It depends on each institution, and it's really up to you to look into. So in Excel, when we want to score these, the first thing we have to do is say, okay, how are we going to identify which bucket someone is in, which bucket someone is in from a, boy, my voice is really starting to go, sorry about this. From a recency standpoint, if they're in the lowest 20%, the next 20%, and so on, so we can give them that 1 to 5 score. How can we identify which 20% they're in? So there's a way to do this within a single formula. What we're going to do, first of all, is we're going to take a list, and I'll kind of share this screen I already have. We're going to take this list, and first of all, we're going to put a blank with any gift. We're going to have 3. We need to have 3 columns, essentially. One is for the last gift, so we can identify who most recently gave. The second is for the number of lifetime gifts, so we can identify how frequently people have given. And lastly, the total amount each prospect has given, so we can have the monetary number. The first thing we need to do to kind of clean this up is to make sure that the last gift date for anyone who has not made a gift is blank. And this will clear up any potential formatting issues. As if you've ever worked with Excel long enough, you'll know that Excel is not very good with dates. And in fact, when I was putting this together, it kept giving me a error for recency because it couldn't recognize these as dates, and I had to kind of fiddle with it before the formatting, so the formatting worked. Once you've done that, then you're going to need to identify how many records you have. And in this case, I've got, I can click on the number of ID numbers we've got, the column with ID numbers, and I can look down here at the bottom right and see that we've got 77,868, which is one less than the count because obviously the column header counts as one. Now that I know that, I'm going to put in a formula that looks like, oh yes, and I should step back 1 minute and say, with this question, the question Mary that Maggie O'Brien has asked, you can do this for really any segment of your giving. You can do it for all of your gifts, which this sample data is the case. Or you can just say, I'm going to do this only with, say, scholarship giving or annual fund giving. You can remove pledges or bequests. It's really up to you, just depending on what you want to, what you're most interested in measuring. As long as everything is consistent, obviously, you just want to make sure that you're measuring the same thing for every constituent. So having identified the number of constituents you have, you're going to go, I'm going to go back to the slideshow, and you're going to look at, you're going to take that number and first divide it by 5, so that essentially you're saying each bucket is going to have this many prospects or donors, 1/5 of the total. Then you're going to use this kind of scary looking formula, but I'm going to go through it piece by piece. And I use A2 just to denote what column you're first using. In this case, it would be B2. I'm just using A2 as a placeholder. If the first record is blank, then it's going to return a 1, because essentially you're saying if the record is blank, then they go in the lowest column because they're not a donor at all. But if that record isn't blank, then you're going to use this formula, the integer of rank EQ. And rank EQ essentially is, let's take all of the records in that column and rank them from highest to lowest. You're going to take the first record, we're going to rank this record against A2, and it's important to put the dollar signs here, A2 dollar. This is essentially a static reference, so that when we move the columns around, we're not moving the reference here. A2 through the end, A at the end of the column, which as we saw from this record, it was 77,869, comma 1. And the dot comma 1 is important because we're looking at the highest record is going to be the end of the column. So the highest record will be like 77,000 and some, and the lowest record will be 1. So we're doing it called ascending rather than descending. So the highest record is not 1, the highest record is 77,000 and some. We divide this rank by the number we got in this section by identifying 1/5 of the number of donors we had. And then we add 1, because doing this integer cuts off any fraction. So it gives us a number from 0 to 4 in this case. So we need to add 1 to make it 1 to 5. And when we do that, the record here looks like this. I should put, just to make it actually sure, I'm going to put this like here. And then, so this is what the record looks like in place. We're going to look at B2 and rank EQ B2 through B, yeah, comparing it B2 through B 77,000 and some, divide it by, I actually put in just divide by 5 right in the formula and add it by 1. And so what we're getting here is, when we do all 3 columns, our first person here has an RFM score of 3-2-5. So surprisingly, even at $880, they are within the top 20% of all of our donors, which seems a bit frustrating, but I'll get to that in just a little bit. Once we've done this, and by the way, I've created this RFM score simply by doing a little concatenate formula here, E2 hyphen F2 hyphen G2. When I've done that, I can highlight this, and this is probably my favorite Excel innovation ever. When you highlight the column, the top row here, you can see this little square at the bottom right of your selection. Double click it, and now it's going to spend a little time calculating. And what essentially this will do, it copies this the whole way down the worksheet, so that when the calculation is done, we'll have the RFM for every single prospect within our document. Now, I was mentioning here, boy, $880 seems kind of low for being in the top 20%. Well, partly one of our issues is that we have, and here we have everything. So we can see that someone like this looks like a pretty good prospect. Wow, they're given 47 gifts. Of course, they've all been pretty small gifts, because 47 gifts is only $1,250. And then anybody who's not giving at all is going to be a 111. And I've had some, it seems like there's been some chat going on here. Oh, let me see here. Aaron, can you repeat what the end of column number is on the formula? Yes. If you highlight your ID numbers, because you know there's going to be something in every column there. If you look down at the bottom right, you'll see the count. And that count will be the last record in the column. So that will be your end of column number. There are, this essentially, it's saying this column goes from A1 to A77,869. So I've often had questions on, and Marianne and I have kind of gone back and forth on this, and I know she's going to weigh in on this, on whether to include people who are never givers in an RFM score. I'm kind of hesitant to, and in this case specifically, I would have removed them, just because I know in this particular case there are a lot of them, and it does affect, how many people are going to be in the 1 and 2 monetary buckets. I think it gives a more nuanced RFM score, but there are questions about that. So maybe another Marianne and I have always discussed, like, at some time we're going to have like a debate water cooler, or maybe a debate lecture someday where we debate issues like this. So so that might be one of the topics of debate we have, yes, Sarah says yes, debate whether to include never givers in an RFM score. But essentially that is your RFM score formula, and with rank EQ, that makes Excel powerful enough to be able to do this all in one formula. So many times before I created this, it took me quite a while to do RFM. Now it takes just a few minutes, and it allows me to do RFM for more than one type of giving. So there are other ways other than RFM to score prospects, and the most common I've ever seen, and in fact, this is what I was asked to do specifically for the Excel workshop in New Orleans, was to score prospects by giving them 1 point if they had each of a certain field in their record. So you get 1 point if you're an alumnus. You get 1 point if you're a donor. You have 1 point if they have a fishing license. And I always throw that in because Texas used to do that. Give people points for fish if they had a fishing license. And this is the sort of thing you can make as simple or as complex as you want it. I mean, a lot of places I know will just say, arbitrarily, okay, we're going to give a point if they have a giving of 1,000 or more, if they're on our annual fund list. Other places will say, okay, let's do a big linear regression, and now we've decided that someone could be a major donor if they give $162.55. So we're going to have, we're going to give them a point if they have $162.55 at least. Or you can give them multiple points or whatever. But how do you do this in Excel? Well, actually, this is powerful, but it's not as difficult as our previous scoring technique. And the general formula simply is an if then else statement. If the record meets the criteria, they get a point, or in cases if you get a multiple point for a criteria, then say 2 or 3 or whatever. If they don't meet the criteria, they get a 0. So it's just if record meets criteria, comma 1, comma 0. And although that sounds pretty simple, you can make this, again, as complex as you want. So let's say we're going to give anybody who's given 5 or more gifts a 1. So I'm just going to say if the column with the number of gifts has more than 4, so in the RFM case, that would be frequency. So if column C is more than 4, i.e. 5 or more, then they get a point. Or we could do if total giving is at least $50,000, they get a point. Now, this last one kind of shows off how bad Excel is with dates. You could try and fiddle around and say if the last gift date was, I believe this is January 1st, 2020. But as you'll find, Excel doesn't really like dates. They think that dates are numbers. And that's good in the sense that I can say, what's the difference between 2 dates? How many days are between 2 dates? I can actually subtract them in Excel, say, subtract the earlier one from the later one, and I get the number of days between the dates. But for the most part, it's kind of a pain in the neck. So what I usually do is just go to Excel and say, okay, it's 3/14/23. What is that in a number? Go to format cells, general, and look at this. Tomorrow is 45,000 in Excel. So happy 45,000 day tomorrow. If you really want to mess with Excel, start putting in dates that are before January 1st, 1900, because then it's going to go, then they go negative and Excel gets all mad at you. Apparently nothing happened before 1900. One day I'll tell this whole story about how one of my coworkers managed to crash Razor's Edge by putting in changing the date of a gift from whatever it was to January 1st, 1700, and he totally crashed the database. Yeah, I'll explain how that happened some other day. Today is Pie Day. Yes, it is. And I'm on a diet. I can't eat any carbs. So, so these kind of simple formulas lead us to some more complex formula. And I would say, and I say this without reservation, I believe these are the most powerful formulas that Excel has ever created. And these are the ifs formulas. When I started working with Excel, if you wanted to know how many records in a column matched a certain criteria, it was very difficult. You had to use something called an array function. And eventually someone at Excel thought, okay, instead let's do what's called a count if. So it would say, you would say, okay, let's count up the number of times, say in a column, a record matches a certain criteria. And from that, they also came up with sum if and average if. So it would give you the sum of the times a certain criteria was matched. So let's say in this case, with our RFM scores, we want to know how much people who gave more than $1,000 gave. So I can do a sum if D2 B77869, and our criteria is greater than 1,000. Oh, no, that's not it. Let's do greater equal. So in this case, wow, in this case, people who gave more than 1,000 have given $1.2 billion. I don't know who came. Oh, I know who came up with this. I know who came up with this. It's someone university who raises a lot more money than most of the people I've ever worked for raise. But as good as things like sum if and count if are, they're a bit limited in the sense that we only can look at one column or one range at a time. Count ifs with an S on the end, sum ifs, and average ifs allow us to look at more than one column at a time. And essentially they give us a chance to filter by more than one piece of information. So this is the same data set as the RFM. It's just giving us different information about the prospects. And let's say I want to know how many, let's pick one. How many Gen Xers, yay us, Gen Xers here are from New Jersey. So I'm going to just for general sake, I'm going to add a column here, and my column is going to look like, my formula is going to look like this. I'm going to start off with count ifs, and when I hit the parentheses, you're going to see criteria range 1, criteria 1, and then ... Essentially, what this formula allows us to do is pick as many criteria, well, up to 255 criteria. I've never even been close to that, but up to 255 criteria in as many ranges as we want. And each of those ranges will filter based on that criteria. So let's say, okay, our first range is going to be I2 through our comma, and I'm going to put Gen X. And then our next range, when I hit the comma, you can see it then pushes out to criteria range 2. Our next criteria is going to be L2 through range L2. And one thing about count ifs and sum ifs and the other ones, you're going to need to have the same number of rows in each criteria range. Otherwise, it's going to return an error because essentially it's trying to find out how many in each of these segments match up. And if the size of the ranges don't match up, it can't do the criteria. And they're just going to put in NJ. So we have 587. We have 587 people who are Gen X and in New Jersey. Now we can make this even a little more powerful because, as you're probably aware with formulas, you can substitute a cell for anything you've put in a criteria. So because cell L2 contains the letters NJ, I can change this to L2. We're still going to get the 587, but now if I copy this down to Virginia, I can see that now we have 2,592 Gen Xers in Virginia. Now, the neat thing about all of this is you can actually create a little table, say, and put, New Jersey, Virginia, DC, et cetera, at the top, and then Gen X, Boomer, Silent down here, and just copy that count ifs through the whole table and have a little table of, the generation and state of where all your prospects are from. And you can do that in a matter of less than a minute, whereas before it took hours to do that kind of stuff. So, well, thank you for, I mean, it is, you're right, Ruthie, it is kind of like a pivot table, but it's a lot more powerful because you can use, text, which you can do in a pivot table, but it's the sort of thing I was able to do once, and I've never been able to figure out how to do it again. So I've never tried to teach it because it just never seems to work right. But yes, you can use this segmentation tool using any type of criteria, whether it's text or whether it's scoring or gifts or whatever. So yeah, it's a really neat tool. And I see I'm running as usual. I'm running late, so I better start working on this. Unfortunately, I know all this is recorded, so you'll be able to see all of this. All my kind of frantic running through this, and I losing my voice again. So the next thing I want to talk about is something I've been using a lot more lately, which is Excel as a data scraper. Excel, when they started using that, Microsoft started using Excel as a data scraper. At first, you could only pull from things like other databases or other worksheets, but now it's been expanded, so you can pull data from almost anywhere, and I mean really almost anywhere. Websites, PDFs, XML files, SQL files, Access databases, even text documents if they've got a table stuck in there. It is really powerful now. So the neat thing about getting data in Excel, well, I thought it was kind of cute, is the function is actually called get. And it's the first times I think that Excel just called something by what we call it in English. So I just realized I forgot to put the PDF file on this computer. So I'll just have to talk about it. So oftentimes we have a table, say it might be on the internet, or we just might have it as a file in PDF format. If that happens, and of course, like I say, I don't have the example, all we need to do is just go to the data And I apologize, someone is pulling leaves right outside my building down here. All we need to do is go to the data tab on the ribbon and go over here to get data. And there are a lot of different sources we can pick from. And if we pick from get file, we can actually go to PDF, and we will actually be able to pull the data from the table that's in the PDF. This is really useful if you're doing this from, say, a website, or this is good for tax season too, just by the way, because sometimes you get your forms in a PDF, and it's easier to look at them in an Excel file. So you can just pull from PDF. And as you can see, there's all kinds of other options here. Even a JSON file, which I don't see much anymore, but I used to see quite a bit. And as I'll show you in just a minute, you can pull from other sources. One of them is right from the web. So I said, I said that if you learn nothing else from me during this webinar, this is something useful to learn. Sometimes I wanted to look when I was doing more analytics, I wanted to find census data so I could compare demographic data. And a while back, I stumbled upon this. And as I say, this table, this link is not some of the data, census data. This is all of the census data. And if I go, I want to control click, here we go. Make sure I'm sharing this. So this is literally everything in the Census Bureau. What we're seeing now is information taken not only from this is from the every 10-year census. There's also other stuff. And for example, let's say I wanted to look for, information to tie into zip codes. All I need to do is just go to 5-digit code tabulation areas within the United States. And it's going to take a little while to download, but this file here, this table is a little too large to display, but other ones can be downloaded directly from here. This is going to be all of the information about people that the census has for 5-digit zip code. So it's got income, it's got number of people employed, it's got every demographic, age, gender, race, everything you can think of is in here, and you can compare this directly to your data by downloading this table and getting it into Excel, and then you can compare it using VLOOKUP, which I don't have time to talk about today, but if you are very interested, there is a class on Stuff Hell that some great funny person who makes lots of jokes put up, and I hope is very helpful. But you can then append all of that information to your prospects using VLOOKUP once you've gotten it from this census page. Let's go back here. So I wanted to do a quick poll from the zip codes just so you have an idea of how to do this. And this is a page that there are a lot of kinds of these ones on the web. But this is just one that I found. Oh, thanks. Marianne even put the link to it here. Come on. Sometimes, yeah, come on. There we go. Sometimes it takes a little while to open a record from a PowerPoint. So you may have seen pages like this before on the internet. This is an example of the 100 richest zip codes in the United States, and here we've got the zip code and the salary per return, et cetera, et cetera. Now, as it stands, there's not much you can do with this because it's just sitting here on the internet. But what if we could pull this right into Razor's Edge? Well, we can do that. Let's create a new workbook. And I'm going to go to data and get data from the web. Come on. Here we go. And we're going to get this little pop-up here, and it asks us to put in the URL. So I'm going to do that. Click OK. And it's going to say, okay, well, I'm going to be anonymous here. And it's going to establish a connection. There's only one table in this document, which is called table 0. So when I click on table 0, it'll give us a preview of what that table is going to look like in Razor's Edge. And then if I click on load, we're going to get all of that information that's in the table. Now, here's one of the cool things about this. You can say to yourself, well, hey, I mean, this changes over time. What happens if they have a new census and this information changes and all of a sudden Beverly Hills is the top 100 zip code and maybe, I don't know, Libertyville fell off the list and someone else came on. Well, the great thing about this is if you look over here at the right, you can see that this is actually a query. And what this query means is this is actually a live document. If this changed on the other website, it would automatically update when we open this document. So you can see this was last refreshed today at 9:43 a.m. And if we open this, say, a year from now, and these things have changed, when we open this file, it will refresh, and we will have all new data here based on what's in the table. And that's pretty neat. I know that Marianne was doing basketball stats for a while. In fact, I always smile when she has a dummy document and I see the name because I recognize them from playing NBA 2K3 or 2K23, sorry. And I'm like, hey, I just played against that guy last night. But what you could do with the basketball stats is you could connect it to an Excel file. You could connect the live stats to an Excel file, and they would change every night when the stats changed. So this is a pretty powerful tool. And again, since we have this zip code, we can VLOOKUP this information directly to our prospect data, so that we have we could add, say, a column here that's just called wealthy, and I'll just say yes, and copy that. And then when we can append a wealthy zip code directly to our prospect list using VLOOKUP. No. Oh, basketball. Oh, if you have data on other tabs when you have a live connection, is that a security concern? No. This connection only connects to this table. It doesn't connect to any other part of the database, of the workbook. If I have data over here, I can change it without affecting any of the other queries or connections. So let's go back. Slideshow here. Yep. Oh, by the way, everyone, this is my cat who likes to interrupt me. So this is actually our entry point to Power Excel. This is our first. This is where most people will see Power Excel for the first time. What we see here on the right hand side of this page essentially is a creation of a table within what's called a data model in Excel. And I'm going to create here another workbook so I can create a data model from scratch. So what you'll need to do to start using Power Excel is go to options and add in what's called the Power Excel, or the Power Pivot package, I think it's actually called. And I'm going to create a Power Pivot table using the two workbooks we've been working on. So in order to do that, you go to Power Pivot and you, I clicked a little early there, you click on Manage when you open that. So it will open another page here called Power Pivot. It'll be called Power Pivot for Excel. And I'm going to pull the two files we were working on before. The first is going to be our water cooler information. Use the first row as column headers. Oh, we gotta shut them down first. And let's go to other sources. I'm going to pull in the water cooler information, that big file. And it's called export. So doing this, essentially what I'm doing is I am taking the workbook sheet and I'm adding it to an Excel data model. An Excel data model, I would say it's a quasi database, and you'll see why I call it that in just a bit. So now we close this and we can see all of the information that was in our previous file. Next, I'm going to add that RFM score file. And here's that file, and you can see down here we've got two tabs. This is just kind of looks like a workbook. You know, you've got this. This is one worksheet, and the RFM scores is another worksheet. So what's the big idea with this? Well, the first thing is we can create a connection between these two. And this is why I call it a quasi database. If you've ever worked with Microsoft Access, and I'll go back here, go over here to data view and click instead on diagram view. And if you've ever worked with Microsoft Access, you'll recognize this as the schema view in Microsoft Access. So now what we want to do is we want to create a connection between these two worksheets. And in this case, our connection or relationship is between ID number, because ID number is a unique identifier for our prospects. So it's already kind of noted, okay, we want to match up ID number in the export. with the ID number in RFM scores. And I click OK. What happened there? Oh, darn it. I saw that. I must have had one. It always goes without fail. You have one record that does not have an ID. And because of that, it's messing up the entire. There it is. Oh, because I had that. I'm just going to put in an ID number. Can. Come on. Let's see. Never fails. You have one. When I did that. Now we can refresh. Yes, when I did the sum, it added that line to the RFM scores and thought that it was. Come on. Oh, Excel is busy. Well, okay. All right. Let's get this.
So Greg, what your end result that you're showing is that you want to show that we can actually reconstruct a beautiful front end that helps us segment our prospects.
Yes.
Yep.
So.
And I'm stepping in because my face has also been that red when stuff is blown up on me in the middle of a water cooler chat.
Yes. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to rebuild that model, but at least it will.
Okay.
At least it will. Oh, there we are. Let's refresh. So what we're going to do here, now that we've connected these, or once we are able to connect these, is we're going to build a power pivot. And we've talked a little bit about power pivots before. I mean, pivot tables. The biggest.
Sorry, Greg, you want to show
sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. When you build a connection, can you do things like list alphabetically by last name? Yes, absolutely. Because one of the things you can see about these data models is these are like tables in Microsoft Excel. If you click on any of these, you can sort. In this case, this is the date, so oldest to newest. You could sort alphabetically. So yes, you could definitely do that when you set up these data models.
You do want to show your screen if you're ready.
Yep. Now I've removed the field that was causing problems. So we're going to do the diagram view, and I'm going to create a relationship between these two.
You're still not showing your screen, buddy.
Oh, sorry. Okay, let's go back here. Whoops. Okay, so now that I fixed this, I've clicked on diagram view here so we can see the two tables. I'm going to create a relationship between these two and share that. We want to connect the two ID numbers. So we've got RFM scores, ID numbers marked, and export ID number marked. Click OK. And back to our pivot. And now you can see that we have a connection between these two tables. And you're probably wondering now why it was important that I did all of this. So now we're going to create a power pivot table. And I'm going to do this in a new worksheet, and let's make sure that I am sharing this. So you can all see this pivot table, right? I just want to make sure. So when I clicked on Power Pivot, it pulled up what looks exactly like a regular pivot table. And you're probably wondering, what's so big about this? Here's the big thing. We got two drop-down menus in pivot table fields. These are two different workbooks. A regular pivot table, you can only use one workbook at a time. Well, we've now created a pivot table that uses two different workbooks. So this is all the information in the big file with all the data about the prospects. But here's the same information, here's the same ID numbers, but with all those RFM scores I just created. These RFM scores are not in the file that we had before. This is now a new file with the RFM scores. And what I can do is say, okay, I want to know all of our, let's see, who are all of our 111s? I want to know who our donors are, who non-donors are, I should say. And let's now go to export, and I want to see how many we have by state. So let's go to state code, and we'll make that rows. And we'll have the count of ID number, so we know how many people. So without putting the RFM score into that other file, we can see how many people are never givers, are 111 RFM people. If we wanted to see something like, okay, let's do a 4-4-2. I'm a soccer fan. The 4-4-2 is our like standard formation in England. So here are all of our 4-4-2 prospects. We've got only 20 of them, and I can also even do ID numbers so you can see which ID numbers are 4-4-2. And again, we are pulling information from two different worksheets here, the RFM scores and the work and the export. Yet we have not included that RFM score on the original document. So this is why a Power Pivot table is very powerful. In fact, we could do a lot of other stuff for this. For example, if we wanted to add that wealthy zip code file, we could add that to the data model. We could put that in and filter by the wealthy zip code file. So that's why it's called a Power Pivot, because it gives you so much more information. And just to make this kind of particularly fun here, I'm going to show you one other thing. I'm going to close this out. Just, I know I'm running out of time, but I just wanted to show this one last thing because it is kind of cool. Let's open up. Let's open up our water cooler information. Oh, and I had condition before. That's going to have to wait to another one. Another day. I'm sorry. But with this water cooler information, we're going to use something when you load in Power Pivot. You're going to get this automatically. That's called 3D map. And if I open the 3D map on any workbook that has a of course it's not going to work on this. It worked on my laptop. because I have to reload this. Yeah, I'm gonna have. Oh, I see why. I didn't mean to do that. Make sure you haven't highlighted any data in here before you open the 3D maps. Okay, so what it's going to do here when I've added field lists, which is, I have to find it, my zip 5. One. All right. So this is a 3D map, and what we're seeing populated, of course, I'm not showing you the correct. There we go. So what we're seeing happen here is Microsoft is populating this map with all of the data. I've pulled zip 5, the postal code, into location, and you can see that slowly we're adding all of the rows with a zip code into the map. And once we've done this, we can start filtering. So we can use that RFM filter. We can use a filter on lifetime giving to say where are our prospects who have given at least $1,000. We can filter by generation or any other type of. So here we are. And the neat thing about this is you can kind of zoom in and out. You see, obviously this is a East Coast organization because they have a huge number of people in the Northeast. But yeah, I can go to filters and say, okay, let's just look at generation, and I'll just look again at generation X, and now we have only the people there. We can even set an advanced filter here. I can't do that for that one, but we can have more than one filter too. We can say, I just want to look at lifetime any giving. And we can do a little slider here. So I want to see anybody who's given at least, and let's say 191,000. And here we have only the people who've given that much. And I can also just change it by number there too. So I know I've run over time. This 3D map is something you should load Power Pivot and Power Excel into your into your Excel using the options tab. If for nothing else, just for this map because it's really cool. And I would just play around with it. The neat thing you can also do with this, you can actually do what's called a capture screen here and kind of scroll around the map. And then you can save that as what they call a tour, and then dump that into your next presentation and show off how you built the map. And then everyone will think you're cool, and they won't laugh at you for being an Excel person. So thank you again. Sorry I wasn't able to get the conditional formatting. We'll have to do that again. We'll have to do that some other day. And I know I run out of time for questions, but I mean I have time for questions myself if you have any questions. Oh, thank you, Ned. Thank you again for coming. Oh. I know I sometimes stumble over things, but that's Excel for you.
So Scott was struggling with how does he add it to his Excel bundle?
Okay, let me see if I can show this here. Let's go to.
I don't know if my voice works here, Marianne, but I think I found it in the column add-ins. I was trying Excel earlier.
That's it.
Yeah, yeah, that's where it is. I was about to go there. Yeah.
I was just looking at Excel add-ins, so it's in the column side.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's where it is. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm glad you found, like I say, if anyone else is looking for it, it's under add-ins. And it's a COM add-in, as Scott said, so it'll be right in here. I've already activated it, but it'll be just under these. If you go to manage and COM add-ins right here, it'll be right there. All right, any other questions? So, all right, well, thank you all for attending and have a good day. I hope you're all handling the time change well. Here in Arizona, we don't have the time change. It's just everyone else changes time, and that makes it really confusing for me. So it's actually only 10 in the morning here. So,
Well, thanks for all this nifty fun stuff, Greg.
Thank you. The map was the thing that didn't work in New Orleans because I lost connection to the internet. You have to have an internet connection to use the map. So,
well, glad you got to show it then.
Yeah, I'm glad this time it worked. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone.
Thanks everybody.